Hey, it's James here from Food Matters, and welcome to this masterclass with Jason Prall on sleep. It's been spoken about recently as one of the most common nutrient deficiencies. Sleep is a nutrient. And I think that this is such an incredible way to frame this conversation because it is something that we are deficient in, and sleep helps in so many areas of our life. I know that you're going to love this masterclass interview. Jason is an epic researcher in the space. He's been in this space for many years, and the way that he distills this knowledge and makes it so practical is just incredible. And this also forms part of our nutrition certification program, this knowledge. We have a whole module on sleep and stress. And this is such an important topic for us to have as part of a nutrition certification program, because without speaking about stress and sleep and the non-food elements of health, it really couldn't be a robust program, and that's what sets us apart. You can find out more about the specials and bonuses we have for a limited time only by clicking on the banner below. Until then, enjoy this masterclass interview with Jason Prall, and I'll see you at the end. Ciao. And my guest today is Jason Prall. Jason is a health educator, practitioner, but why I get along with Jason so well, he is also a filmmaker. He's made an epic documentary series where he traveled to over 10 countries around the world to create the Human Longevity Project, which is a 9-part film series about the longest lived, healthiest, happiest people on planet Earth. And he's also the author of a book called Beyond Longevity. And you can find that at beyondlongevitybook.com. It's published with Hay House, one of my favorite publishers as well. And today, Jason and I, in this masterclass exploration deep dive, are going to be talking about the power of harnessing circadian rhythm and the natural cycles of sunlight and moonlight, let's say, to sleep better, which is one of the most commonly lacking nutrients, if we could call sleep a nutrient, in the developed West, and how important it is for longevity. And we're going to be talking about how to fall asleep faster and improve your sleep cycle. Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. We've had a few discussions and a few catch-ups, and loving where our conversations are going. And to jump straight to it, like, why is sleep so important for health and longevity? Is this something that you found? Did you find some correlations when you were working on your research and the documentary?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most fascinating topics, right? Like, we can't go very long without sleep. So fundamentally, we each know how important sleep is, right? Like in our day-to-day experience, we can't go more than a few days without sleep, right? And everything starts to break down, right? And if we travel across time zones, all of a sudden we know things are a mess, right? So we get sicker, we can't think well, we don't digest food as much, we're low in energy, right? Like everything just starts to go into chaos, biologically speaking, right? Our metabolic function suffers, everything starts to, our mood dysregulation, I mean, it's just a mess, right? So sleep is fundamental. And it's funny because we don't even really know why. Like we're studying it and we know the effects and we know why it's important to some degree, but we fundamentally at its core don't really know why we sleep. We think we know, we have some guesses, we see the benefits clearly, and we've studied that to a huge degree, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But I just think it's interesting to always put this stuff into context, right? Like we know a lot, and yet we don't know a lot too. So there's still so much I think we're going to learn as we continue to study the brain, neuroscience. I mean, it wasn't only in 2017 that the Nobel Prize was given in medicine for three scientists studying chronobiology, or how light affects our biological function, and this idea of circadian rhythm, right? And so, of course, when you win the Nobel Prize, it was for generally work that was done 10 or 20 or even 30 or more years earlier. So we've been studying this for a while, but in the grand scheme of things, from a scientific perspective, this is a very new realm that we're studying, but we all know how important it is. And when I was doing the Human Longevity Project, speaking with people in their 90s and beyond 100 around the world, I asked them some interesting questions that to them were kind of non-starters, right? I asked them about cancer, tell me about cancer. The conversation didn't go anywhere because it just wasn't as prevalent as what we see in the West. I asked them about digestive issues, especially in elderly populations. That's a common thing in the US, let alone in the middle age or even younger. They didn't really have a ton of those, right? I asked them about sleep problems. Didn't really have any of those. So it's like I couldn't even get a conversation going around this stuff because it just wasn't really an issue. The only guy I found an issue with, I was in Costa Rica, and I was speaking with this gentleman who was in his like mid 30s. He's a tour guide in Costa Rica, so he spoke really good English. But he was tied to the local elders, and it was his family. And so he was a great person to speak with, and he taught me a lot about his parents' generation and his grandparents' generation, his life growing up. So I learned a ton. But he was the only one that had sleep issues, and it was basically because he was acting like an American or like somebody from the
Yeah.
West. He had a
Yeah.
business, and he was always thinking about it, and he was worried about it. And so it was the old way of living compared to this sort of new way of living that really created a huge difference.
Yeah, wow. And you touch on something that's interesting in this opening of the discussion, which is that sleep is a bit mysterious. Like we
Mm,
disappear into our
totally.
rooms for like a third of our life, and
Yeah.
and the sun disappears and it gets dark, and like it's a really fascinating concept, and it's so critical. Like you said, like you can, if you go a few days without sleep, you know about it. I mean, you're in a tragic state. So the body, so let's talk about sleep as we get into this discussion. What is happening in the body when we sleep? What is the
Mm.
biochemical, biological processes that are taking place as we sleep?
Yeah. So fundamentally, during the day or when we're active, right, we're really creating a lot of destruction in the body, right? We're asking a lot of our nervous system, of our tissues. We're engaging with the world, right? Whether we're working out or whether we're digesting food, anytime we're engaging actively, essentially tipping into the sympathetic side of our nervous system, this is a breakdown mode. This is an engaging with the world, right? We're interacting with the world, and so this causes destruction. It causes inflammation. It causes our cells to have to perform tasks to a huge degree, right? So we're contending with the stimuli of the world, and then of course during the sleep, it should be the opposite. If we're sleeping properly and we're sleeping well and at the right times, then now we're starting to dip into the parasympathetic side, right? This is when the nervous system shifts, and we turn on a whole host of functions that are involved with repair, with cleanup, right? If you think about your day to day in your house, right? During the day, you're making food, and the kitchen becomes a mess, and your kids are playing, and basically it just becomes destruction, right? And you're trying to do a little cleanup here and there to kind of keep things tidy, but there becomes a point, usually at night or maybe during the weekends or what have you. Now you do a massive cleanup, right? You clean up the kitchen after your dinner, right? You're washing all the dishes. This is essentially what's happening in the body, right? There are massive programs that are designed to recycle proteins, right? To clean up, and this is happening at the micro level. So inside the cell, right? We have programs that are actually, recycling proteins, recycling mitochondria, the energy center, which also produce proteins and do a whole host of other things, produce hormones. Cell communication. We're cleaning up old mitochondria that aren't working well, damaged mitochondria. We're cleaning up cells and we're cell destruction, right? This is apoptosis. This idea is huge. Like if we want to avoid cancer, we need our cells to sort of commit suicide. We need this sort of cell destruction and cleanup. And so that's what's happening at night. We're taking out the trash at night in our brains, right? We have this sort of buildup of these proteins, right? These amyloid beta proteins, these tau proteins. This is a natural accumulation in the brain at night. Well, we have this glymphatic system, right, which is the lymphatic system of the brain. So the cerebral spinal fluid flows into the brain, basically washes the brain and pulls all those damaged proteins and all that out of the brain into the lymphatic system, into the lymph nodes, and throughout the waist, right? And this is all governed by circadian biology. It doesn't just happen haphazardly. It doesn't happen continuously throughout the day and night. No, it actually flows into the brain at night and then dumps as we enter the next day into the lymph nodes, and we're processing that stuff. So this is a really, really important process. And I only mentioned a handful of things, right? We make new neural connections, right? We're learning. We're going from short-term to long-term memory, right? If you've ever been around a child, like this is part of the reason why sleep is so critical for infants and for young ones, is because so much processing is happening, so much building is happening. This is a very building, repairing, growing sort of stage. And so when we get really, really good sleep, athletes are notorious for really focusing on sleep, right? If they know how important it is. So when they're practicing a golf swing over and over again, getting good sleep is the thing that allows that neuromuscular connection to take hold. So it's these pathways that get grooved. Same thing when you play an instrument or you learn any new task, right? That's all getting ingrained at night. So we reset our neurotransmitters. If you've ever gotten poor sleep for a consistent period of time, or even perhaps one night, you can wake up and you feel a little bit more depressed, a little more anxious, a little more moody, a little bit more on edge, a little more apathetic, like you just don't really care. You have no motivation. Right? This is neurotransmitter balance, right? So this is all happening during sleep. We're rebalancing all this stuff. So when we don't get good sleep, everything starts to go awry, and we start to end up in this sort of metabolic chaos. And I'll save you, I'll kind of give you a little hint for maybe some of the stuff we're going to get into. It affects every tissue, every cell in the body.
Wow. Some of the conversations I've been having recently with Krista Recchio, John Gabriel, a few others, is around this concept that underlying a lot of the issues that we suffer from in the West. So you've done a lot of research on these long-lived, healthy, happy people, and you talk to them about cancer and sleep issues and gut, and they're like, what do you mean? So that's amazing, right? First of all. Then in the West, the majority of people are suffering from these conditions. We know this statistically, right? And as we delve deeper into the research and the science, we're starting to see that chronic low-grade stress and chronic low-grade inflammation are driving a lot of these issues. So insulin resistance, leptin resistance, then poor sleep is impacting this, I would imagine. So is poor sleep keeping us in a chronic stress state? And stress can lead to poor sleep too, right? And stress is one of these precursors. And running things through our brain, we're so much more active. We've got all these things on our mind. We're taking that into our sleep cycle, and it's perpetuating poor sleep habits. What is happening with inflammation and with inflammation and stress when we're sleeping poorly, and does it exacerbate this issue that drives a lot of chronic illness?
Yeah. So the first challenge here with any chronic issue or inflammatory condition or metabolic dysfunction is that everything affects everything, right? I mean, this is the difficult part to unwind. And yet the beautiful part is that we can interrupt the cycle at any point, right? So what I mean by this is that, so I've got a 3-year-old, right? And, for the first year and a half, I mean, I just got terrible sleep. He was waking up all the time. He had like a backwards circadian rhythm, and I don't know why. He would wake up and he would go to sleep at the wrong times, and it was just an absolute mess. And so my sleep was terrible. And what I noticed was that even though I know better, I know what good foods are, I know what to eat and what not to eat, I know generally what the case, and for my individual circumstance, what's generally good for me. And the challenge that I was facing was that each morning, each day, I was finding myself being more drawn to the processed foods, more drawn to the high glycemic foods, high fatty foods, the polyunsaturated fats, all the things that I know drive up inflammation, all the bad habits, so to speak, that I know are not good. And yet it's like my willpower just had a fraction of hope to deny this deep urge signaling coming from my microbiota, come from my neurology. It was all deeply embedded, right, in my biology. These are hardwired systems for survival. And so when we don't get good sleep, we start to crave bad food, right? That's not good for us. We start to eat at the wrong time of day, right? We are, like I said, our moods are dysregulated. We don't feel like exercising, right? And to be honest, it actually may not be the greatest thing to do a really challenging, like CrossFit workout or go run 5-10 miles, briskly. Like, it's not a good idea when your autonomic nervous system isn't reset. And one of the things we can do to measure that is through heart rate variability, right? So if we measure heart rate variability throughout the day, and you might see an Oura Ring is a good thing to look at. They've got some great data to look at in terms of your readiness score, and is your heart rate variability high? And if your heart rate variability is high, that means your nervous system is primed and ready to go for something strenuous. But if it's low, if you get bad sleep and your heart rate variability is low, then you can actually cause more damage because your nervous system is not capable of going through a tremendous amount of stress, right? So this is the downward spiral. So we're not sleeping well, we're making bad choices, we're not exercising, our mood is kind of all over the place. We don't really feel like doing much. We lack motivation. Our relationships are a mess. So you can see that what I'm pointing to here is the habits. It starts to affect all of our habits. And the more bad habits we take on, then of course more inflammation, and it's a downward spiral. But leaving all of that aside, circadian rhythm alone, we know this through the research. We see an increase in neuroinflammation. So brain inflammation goes up. We see poor blood flow to the brain itself. Right, we see less melatonin production. Melatonin, of course, is it is the primary antioxidant hormone in the body. It's much more powerful than glutathione. It is much more powerful than superoxide dismutase. Melatonin is king for the mitochondria, for down-regulating inflammation. Melatonin also signals to the gut microbiota. So when you make melatonin, not only are you sort of feeding and sort of bathing your cells and your mitochondria in this antioxidant signaling mechanism known as melatonin, but you're signaling microbiota and their function too. So melatonin is huge. But we also see directly circadian rhythm disruption causes insulin dysregulation. So you become less insulin sensitive. When you have a disrupted circadian rhythm. Also, because when you have high blood sugar or poor blood sugar control, that's one thing, right? But if you have poor blood sugar control and you have high insulin and the insulin's not really doing much, then that's an entirely different issue, right? That's a really strong issue that we see, and it's really tied to circadian rhythm. So we see metabolic dysfunction. Circadian rhythm also affects detoxification. So if you're doing all the right things, you're taking your detox herbs, you're eating the right foods, you got this great diet under control, but the cellular machinery responsible for detoxification gets shut down because your circadian rhythm's out of whack, then all the good things you're doing aren't going to be as effective, right? So it's affecting things on such a primal level, right? We also see that microbiota. We see microbiota shifts. They become more imbalanced when we are disrupted, when our circadian rhythm is disrupted. We actually see a loss of short chain fatty acid producing bacteria, right? So you might see this a lot with like the keto community. They love the short chain fatty acids and they're eating all this fat to try to produce short chain fatty acids. Well, our gut microbiota produce these things from starchy carbohydrates, right? So when you eat these fibers and these starches, if you have the right bacteria in there, then they're going to produce short chain fatty acids for you, which are feeding your colonocytes, your colon cells, keeping your colon cells really healthy. Your mitochondria in your colon cells love short chain fatty acids like butyrate, right? So they're using these fuel sources at the most basic level. But if you don't have the right bacteria, then you could be eating the short chain fatty acid producing starches, but it's not going to really produce as much short chain fatty acids because the bacteria have been shifted because your circadian rhythm's out of whack.
Wow.
Right? So we see all kinds of inflammation in the gut itself. So this is a big one, right? The link between circadian rhythm and the gut dysfunction is massive, right? So you see microbiota shifts, you see leaky gut is more prevalent, leaky brain is more prevalent. You see, so if you've got leaky gut because of circadian disruption, right? We've got cortisols all over the map. We've got adrenaline, noradrenaline. All these things are starting to go out of whack. We have a loss of melatonin. By the way, melatonin is 400 times more prevalent in the gut than it is in the brain. So it's really, really important. So we're seeing the signaling at the gut level starts to go awry. Now we've got leaky gut, disrupted microbial populations. Now we're going to get gut immune issues. We're going to see food sensitivities, right? We're going to start to see a loss of tolerance. So now we're going to see we don't tolerate chemicals as well. We don't tolerate, let's say, oxalates as well. All these things that we might consider bad or inflammatory. Well, that's only true if the integrity is not there, if the microbial balance is not there. These sort of micro stressors can be tolerated and in some cases are good. Oxalates can be a beneficial signaling molecule in small doses. But again, it's all dependent on the environment. And so if the environment's just a mess, our immune system is going to be a mess. Our gut-brain signaling is a mess. Now, again, Imagine a scenario where circadian rhythms is just a complete mess because you're working swing shifts or you're traveling. James, I know you and I both travel a lot, going across time zones. If we're doing this regularly and our circadian rhythm is constantly disrupted, then we could be eating the best diet in the world, and it's still going to have inflammatory effects to some degree because of the loss of integrity. And this is what I see all day long. People eating amazing diets. I'm like, what's going on? Usually it's either infections and or circadian rhythm disruptions and or some kind of chemical metal issues. So this is what's really, really critical is that, again, now, remember I had mentioned detoxification pathways are disrupted. So if we've got infections and metals going on or chemicals and we can't detox because their circadian rhythm's a mess and that's impacting. So it's this web of just a dysfunctional mess. And we can, again, do all the right things and interrupt that process. But a huge part of it is addressing circadian rhythm for at least a portion of the population. For some people, it's this big, and for some people, it's this big, right? So, but for all of us, it does play a role. And so if we can optimize that, then all these other things that we're doing are going to they're just going to take hold that much better.
So big. And I think the more that I get into this topic, and you've enlightened me to so many different facets of this, the more that I realize it's a primal issue, as you say. And I love that this drives so much of the myriad of problems that we're suffering from in the West. And it's related back to poor sleep or poor circadian rhythm cycles. And what I find, two things are funny. One is we say in our culture, sleep like a baby. I think babies sleep horribly, and they sleep, so we shouldn't say that anymore. Two, the second part of this that I really wanted to dial in on is the fact that, you know how in health we see certain people like that will smoke cigarettes and they're healthy, or that they might not eat that well, but they're healthy. Now, they're probably sleeping perfectly, right? And then you've got the people that are eating everything perfect. They're taking all the right supplements. They're doing all the right things. And yet their sleep is a mess and their body and their health is a mess. They keep gaining weight. They can't fall back asleep after they wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning. Their hormones are all over the place. And yet if you look at their diet and their lifestyle on paper, except for sleep, everything's perfect. Now, this is such a huge gaping hole in the discussion of health and well-being, because over the last 10 to 15 years, and especially since sort of Food Matters came out and then Food Inc., and then all this awareness around food came to the forefront, we're obsessed about clean eating and gluten-free and like all these diets, and they're amazing and they can help us detox and support healthy metabolic function and heal the gut. But if we hate sleeping, it don't matter, and if we're not sleeping, we eat horribly and our habits go through the floor. And that's totally true for anybody that's had a big night out or that's traveled, and then you just go and eat, highly processed carbohydrates or sugary foods or fats, like you said. So this is huge. What can people do, or what can people know about? And in essence, then we should be prioritizing sleep nutrients, sleep rituals, circadian rhythm practices over any of those other practices in theory.
Yes. And I would say even in practice, right? So what I see in clinic, right, I would get people with multiple food sensitivities. I mean, I'm talking they could only eat 10 or 12. They've identified 12 foods that they can eat and that's it, right? Sensitive to broccoli, sensitive to these healthy foods that most everybody would agree on, and they can't eat them, right? And you have all kinds of these just chronic systemic inflammations that maybe don't even have a name. They're just syndromes with all these things going on. And what I noticed, there was a few core things that I would always focus on. Circadian rhythm was number one, because it's kind of the easiest and most global and most foundational component. And the reason I say that is because even in the cancer research, right, we do cancer drugs. They've now identified that certain cancer drugs are more effective when you take them at certain times of the day. So now even modern sort of pharmaceutical science is agreeing that timing matters with this stuff. Now, never mind that Chinese medicine has been saying this for thousands of years. Never mind that Ayurveda has been saying this for thousands of years. Never mind that indigenous peoples all over the world have understood this, right? We're now understanding it in our scientific reality. So it is foundational for all of the things that we do, right? Doing acupuncture at 2 a.m. is going to have different effects than doing acupuncture at noon, right? So eating a really healthy salad is going to have a different impact on the body at noon than it is at 4 a.m. Right? There are times to eat and there are times to not eat. And so timing is fundamental. And when you get this right, everything starts to make sense. And even in the like, one of the things that they've done is looked at people that work swing shifts or night shifts, right? And what they realize is that all-cause mortality increases for those who are working at night.
I've seen that data. It's crazy.
Autoimmune conditions, cancers, you name the disease. It doesn't matter what disease or what symptom we call it. They all increase dramatically. So circadian rhythm was huge. And we'll just throw in sleep with that because they kind of go hand in hand. But we'll put that as one category. Another one is trauma. And we won't get too much into that, but that's another thing that can underlie a lot of things. And then another big one is movement and exercise. So I saw people eating the most horrible diets, and because they were moving enough in the right ways, not overdoing it, but with consistent movement, like their body was able to detox properly, to get rid of things, to optimize gut. Exercise is amazing. What I love about food is because it's one of the most consistent and persistent influences on our biology, it can signal us. Right. So recently I noticed I was sensitive to oxalates, and I'm like, man, these oxalates are really affecting me. I took away oxalates and I noticed inflammation was going down. So that signaled me to something. Let me look and see if there's some mold or some kind of aspergillus. Sure enough, it's exactly what I found. Right. So we can identify something going on because food is a stimulus that can trigger us. So food is kind of the trigger. Right? That's what I love about food, and it can really signal. The other aspect is that food can be medicine in the right conditions, but it's all about context, right? So each individual is different. You and I are going to have different dietary requirements just based on our constitutions, based on our age, based on all kinds of different circumstances, right? And and yet there are still general rules that we can stick to with food. But most of the time I've found that if somebody has, for whatever reason, look, I honestly think that some people are constitutionally lucky, if you will. They've just kind of been born into a better constitutional sort of framework. Biologically speaking, they can tolerate more unhealthy living. But look, that's going to catch up to us eventually. It may not be in your life or your generation, but it may be your kids, right? So this stuff is not something we can just shrug off. And some of us who may be more sensitive, I would put myself into that category. I was forced to learn how to live in alignment because I was getting all of these inflammatory signals based on doing just something slightly wrong. I'd eat a pizza and I'd get skin inflammation. I'm like, what the hell? I'm doing everything else right. And I have one little piece of pizza, and I'd blow up. And so that helped me recognize, it taught me, right? And while some other people can drink beer and eat ice cream and do all these things, and they don't really seem to have any issues. Now, that we can be jealous of that, or we can want that, or we can just recognize, actually, these things are teaching me, right? These symptoms that are showing up are actually guiding me into a place of alignment and signaling that something in my life may be out of balance, may be out of alignment. And circadian rhythm is a huge one, right? Because we all pay the piper at some point if we're doing the wrong things. If we're doing things that are out of balance, out of alignment with our constitution or with health in general. And so whether it's showing up now as food sensitivities or whether it's showing up later as Alzheimer's and dementia or cancer out of the blue, it's going to come around, right? So it's really important to recognize the fundamental aspects to this. And there's nothing more fundamental than circadian rhythm. It governs the function of every organism on the planet. It is deeply, just looking at from the evolutionary perspective, right? If we look at kind of the phylogenetics of everything, it all goes back to light, right? Plants, fungi, protozoa, everything is guided by circadian function, right? So that should tell you that it is so deeply embedded into biology itself that we can't ignore it. We cannot just shrug it off. It is fundamental.
Wow. Who knew that so much was happening while we sleep, that our body was helping to heal itself and to prepare itself for another day? So incredible. If you love this information, you want to learn more about sleep and managing stress naturally, Jason Prall is one of the teachers of the 50 experts that we have inside the nutrition certification program. We have an incredible workbook and study and lecture series alongside quizzes with each module, and as you pass them all, you will be issued with an internationally accredited certificate, whether that's just for your own sense of achievement, or if you're in professional practice, it will give you the capacity to receive insurance and membership in over 35 countries so that you can work with clients one-on-one or a group setting. To find out more about the current intake of the Nutrition Certification Program, click the banner below this video. It's only open for a limited time. Now, let's get back to the masterclass. It's little wonder that the ancients paid so much attention to this sun god in a way. They're
Totally.
like, this is the driver of all life on planet Earth, you know, and then the shadow being the moon and those two elements together.
And we need both.
Yeah.
We need both, right? Like that's what's important. And I see, sorry to interrupt you, but
Please.
this circadian rhythm, what I see now is that one of the things that we want to do is we want to, get rid of the blue and the green lights at night, right? That's part of the natural aspect of improving circadian rhythm, lowering the overall lighting and the stimulus after the sun goes down. And I do see that as more of a common thing. We can download, Flux app on our computers, and it turns the screen a little orange, and we have orange light bulbs and blue blocking glasses, and this is all great. That's trying to mimic the natural darkness that we would see, whether, because before we invented all this artificial lighting, we had fire, we had the moon, the stars, what else? Lightning.
That's it.
That's kind of it. Right? At night. And so that's all was used to for a long time. And then we started inventing all this stuff. Well, that's important. So we need to re-engage with the darkness, which you're pointing to here, the moonlight. Even going out and moon bathing is an ancient practice. Right. So that actually stimulates a parasympathetic response in the body. And it's a cooling effect. But this darkness is a key factor. And then the other side is light. So we actually want to go engage with the light during the day, particularly in the morning. So it is about the polarities. It is about recognizing the polarities of these things. And what we're finding ourselves in the modern world is in this sort of kind of lit. I mean, it seems bright to our conscious mind that I'm in this room and it looks bright, but it's nowhere near the flux capacity, the flux density of the outside, right? So we have so much more power of the sunlight, even through clouds on a rainy day. It's so much brighter than it is indoors. So we're kind of in this somewhat dark, somewhat lit indoor environment all day long into the night, right? Looking at our phones.
I know.
And so we're not getting the polarity that our biology was used to.
And I think that light awareness is raising in popularity in terms of, like you said, the color of screens, the blue blocking glasses, the etc. However, there's still so many issues. Like you go to a hotel and you go and put the bathroom light on at night, and it's this full tilt fluoro, like maximum,
it's crazy,
lumens, and it's just like whoa, or like, and even houses are not well designed if someone wants to get something out of the fridge. It's just
or street lights, right? Like some of us have street lights outside, and ideally, the ideal scenario would actually be that our window curtains are drawn at night.
Sure,
and it's
so you can
perfectly
get that
pitch black outside.
Yeah,
exactly. And then when the sun rises, that's what wakes us up, right? The temperature rises, the sun rises, the light comes through our eyelids because they're so thin, and it hits signals in our optic chiasm to our hypothalamus, pituitary, pineal gland, turns on a bunch of switches and goes, hey, let's turn on some cortisol. It's morning time, right? So this is the natural evolutionary cycle. And this is what happened. They took people that had really, really bad sleep, insomniacs, right? And they would take them into the woods and go camping for like a couple weeks. Sure enough, setting the circadian rhythm, they all became normal sleepers. So, and it's because, and if anybody's gone camping, you recognize this, right? Because it's so annoying sometimes when you're camping, because at like 6:30 or 7 o'clock, you're like tired, you got the fire going, you're having fun. You're like, what time? It must be late. No, it's only 8:30. What the hell? And you start going to sleep a little earlier. And then you wake up at like 4:30 or 5 when the crack of dawn and the sun's just peaking, right? And the temperature's starting to rise. You're getting hot, right? And you wake up and it's so early, right? So this is what naturally happens when we're in that environment. And ideally, we would have that in our homes too. And we keep our windows, curtains drawn, no street lights, no city lighting. And then as the sun rises, we start to wake up. So if we can start to engage with that in some way, That's what we're trying to accomplish. Unfortunately, for many of us, we got to have blackout curtains because there's too much outdoor lighting making its way in, yeah, throughout the night, right? So it's a little bit challenging now, but what one of the things that we can do, and that I would highly recommend, is that once you wake up, whether you wake up with an alarm or whether you naturally wake up, assuming that the sun is up or is coming up soon, go outside first thing in the morning and get that natural daylight into your eyes, even if ideally on your skin, but definitely through the eyes. And if you wear glasses, it can actually be really beneficial just to take off the glasses, or contacts too. Take those off and let the light get into your naked eye. That actually has a little bit better signaling. But even if you can't do that, just getting outside and letting that ambient light, it doesn't have to be a sunny day. It can be snowing, it can be raining, cloudy, but that light will actually start to set your internal alarm clock. It's actually going to set your clock and say, hey, it's morning. Turn on all these things. Spike that cortisol. That cortisol spike is what you want. You want a nice, high, good cortisol spike in the morning. Then you wake up fresh. You wake up feeling good. Your pain decreases, right? You have energy. You don't crave something sugary to get that blood sugar up, right? Like it's really wild how much that's going to make a difference. And so when you do that on a regular basis, it may take 2-3 weeks of consistently going outside in the morning. Ideally, go for a walk. You can go for a 15 to 20 minute walk outside, get your rain stuff on. You might have an umbrella. Doesn't really matter. But outside, that daylight is going to signal to your brain, to the rest of your body, to your hormones, to ghrelin, to neuropeptide Y, to insulin, all the signals throughout the body, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, growth hormones, everything is going to be starting to signal. You're going to get better insulin regulation, better fat burning. I've had clients that do this, only this, didn't change diet at all, and they would lose like 10, 12 pounds in a month. Just falls off because their hormones start to regulate. And any bodybuilder knows this. It's all about hormones, right? If you're trying to build your body and get ripped and all this stuff, like that's why they do steroids, right? Like hormones guide all of this stuff. So when your hormones are on point, for however old you are, optimized for your age and where you're at in your life, then you will naturally lose weight or even gain weight if that's what your body is really wanting to do. But you will start to normalize and regulate and find a new homeostasis, a new balance. Your digestion starts to improve. Your blood sugar improves. Your cortisol levels improve. Your cholesterol levels improve. Everything starts to normalize. That's what's crazy about this. And I've had so many clients. I've even had clients, their eyesight improves because they finally got light in their eyes. I mean, I can't. It's really hard to overstate, and you don't really realize until you put this into practice. Even if you don't think you're that out of whack, if you start to actually implement this on a regular basis, give it 21 days, and you're going to see everything start to improve, including your sleep at night. You'll get better sleep, deeper sleep, longer sleep, or maybe even shorter sleep, but more restful, restorative sleep. So it's truly, truly impactful. You'll make better eating decisions. Everything starts to improve.
Wow. And I'm always looking for these 80/20s. I love permaculture design in gardening, like how to set up your garden so you do less work, but you get more harvest, And this is like roll out of bed, walk outside, look into the light,
your mood improves. You're more inspired during the day. You get creative. You're in a good mood. You're more likely to tackle the day, right? Like everything you're looking for can be corrected, improved, and optimized by just getting enough daylight, right? Like this light is a nutrient, and we're so many of us are deficient. And that morning time is crucial to set the clock, right? It is really synchronizing your circadian rhythm. It's sort of setting that time. And so again, it's spiking the cortisol higher and better in the morning, and it's also going to help increase your melatonin production at night. Not only that, if you can get light throughout the day in any way, let's say you're working normal 9 to 5. This is my typical. In fact, I used to live in Seattle, and in the winter it's dark and it's gray and it's miserable, right? And I used to drive to work at 7 or 7:30, and it was pitch black. And then I'd be at work and it's dark and gray. I'd have an hour lunch. At that point, that's when I needed to go outside and just get as much light in my eyes as I can. That will help as well. So no matter what your circumstances are, the more that you can allow your body to go outside, it's We can't detect it, but the light in the eyes is doing so many things, and it will help every area of life. So the
I
more we
love
can get
that.
in the morning, the more we can get throughout the day, it's going to benefit.
I love that. Amazing. Next thing that I find interesting when I first came across this idea of circadian rhythm, and it was more from the Vedic or Ayurvedic system, was this idea that we should eat lighter in the morning and then
Mm,
peak during the day and then lighter in the evening and then that's it. And eating during light time hours. Now, what generally happens is we have this big blowout at breakfast, people skip lunch and then a big late dinner and it's dark and it's 9 p.m. but the lights are on inside the house, so we've messed it up really. So tell me
totally.
about this system, and does that overlap with your research and what you're finding, especially with the anthropologically as well, with these long-lived, healthy, happy people?
Yeah, it's interesting when we spoke with these people around the world, right? And this is Sardinia and Ikaria and Okinawa and Costa Rica. They're all over the place, right? At different latitudes and different altitudes and different cultures. And again, their fundamental characteristic that was unbroken throughout all of these, as well as all the indigenous cultures, is they operate by the daily cycles. So we have somehow built a structure to kind of get outside of this cycle, right? It's not serving us to a huge degree. It's causing problems, but somehow we figured it out, right? We got our temperature set in the U.S. anyway at 68 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the day, right? We've like created these like optimal conditions
Yeah.
that is really not optimal for our health, but they didn't have that luxury.
Mm.
They would get up when the animals got up, when the sun got up, right? When life started to return to the day, that was when they got up because they had to herd or move animals. They had to work the fields, etc. And they couldn't work at night. Like you couldn't really do this stuff at night. So they would work during the day. So everything was guided by that. And the seasons, right? The foods that they were growing, the foods that they were eating, all guided by the seasons. And so their whole operation was guided this way. So they would get up either just before sunrise or right at to work with the animals or whatever. They would have breakfast. So they would have some breakfast, but they wouldn't have, imagine if you're working in that type of way. Would you really sit down and just gorge yourself and just have this massive, huge breakfast and then try to go work in the fields and do all this labor? No. But you also wouldn't fast, right? So we're seeing this now where we have these long extended fasts. And I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting. And it's also sort of a modern invention based off of our culture and the circumstances that we've created. So it can be good. It has its place. But for many people, particularly women that are cycling, that are still menstruating, this intermittent fasting for long periods of time is not the greatest thing. And if you're going to do it, you're going to do it at certain points in your cycle, actually. So you time it with your cycle. And so, again, kind of the theme that's showing up here is cycles. You do things at certain times and not at other times, right? And so they would have a little bit of breakfast, but it wouldn't be huge. But they needed a little bit of sort of long sustained energy, blood sugar control, right?
Yeah.
And so they would have a little bit of breakfast, then they
Well,
would have a
they would
bigger
break their fast, right?
break their
The
fast.
fast at
That's
night,
exactly right.
you break it in the morning.
Exactly. So they have something, breakfast around 6 or 7 or whatever the case is
Mm-hmm.
before going and working in the fields. And then they would have a lunch, right? And they have a pretty good sized lunch. That's usually where they had a nice big meal. In fact, some of them would drink wine in some of the regions. But the point is they had a nice big meal because they've been working for 5, 6, 7 hours already, with physical activity. So they've been moving all day, right? And then they would tend to have like a little siesta after lunch, right? Because it's the hottest part of the day. They're digesting a big meal, right? So you can see like they were flowing with this natural rhythm, and your digestion is strongest during that middle of the day. So the digestion follows the sun, right? So when the sun starts to peak, your digestion starts to peak, right? When the sun goes down, then our digestion starts to go down. This is our solar fire, right? This ability to digest. In Ayurveda, we call it Agni, the ability to transform and digest, right? So that starts to diminish the later in the day. So if we just follow that basic rhythm, we're going to be in good shape. And so that's exactly what we saw. And typically with these elders, we would find that they would eat 3 meals a day, right? I mean, if you asked your grandparents what they ate, they'd say 3 meals a day. They weren't doing intermittent fasting and all this fancy stuff. They ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? And typically, some might call it supper, but they would, typically in most cultures, you would eat around 5, maybe 6 at the most. You wouldn't eat at 7, 8, or 9. you'd already be winding down, right? And in those cultures, they didn't have electricity up until about 1960. So most of them lived most of their lives with no electricity. So you got to get things done before the sun goes down, right? And after the sun goes down, they would sit around, they'd tell stories. Of course, they had lamps, had the carbide lamps and oil lamps and that kind of thing. But imagine
whale
basically,
oil lamps,
yeah,
probably.
exactly. Yeah. And so imagine when the power goes out, if anybody's experienced that, what do you do?
Yeah.
Well, typically you light some candles, you
Yeah.
play some games, you tell some stories, and you're chilling,
Mhm.
right? That was their life
Yeah.
every day and every night. So they weren't eating these big meals of steak and huge pasta dishes and all this stuff, right? That was earlier in the day so that digestion would complete, so that when they get to that 7, 8, 9 p.m., now their detoxification pathways, their cleanup pathways are already starting to engage, right? They've digested those meals. So that's really how we want to follow the daily rhythm. Just look at the sun, and it's intuitive, right? It's intuitive, but you kind of have to go backwards in time and get out of the modern sort of chaos that we find ourselves in. And then you can all of a sudden see through some of the haze and go, oh yeah, this is obvious.
And then also modernize it in a way, because we are living in modern times, in
Totally.
apartments, in busy cities, in floodlit streets all night, So let's talk about, we've spoken about morning rituals. So wake up with or around sunlight, get outside, look into the light. There are people that do sun gazing when the sun's at a very low horizon, but
Very low.
Just letting that sun hit your body. And I think we have eyes, but our whole body is a receptor to light as well. So, there's a lot of people that say as much of the body as you can exposed to the sun early in the morning,
Yep.
I would say. And then
we know the skin actually produces corticotropin releasing hormone, which is the precursor to cortisol.
Okay.
So just sun on the skin, this is a recent finding that the skin is actually producing this hormone. We used to think this was only produced in the brain. No. We're producing it in the skin. So yeah, I'm 100% on board that, look, we are receptors for this energy. Like, skin is not just this barrier organ. It is a receptor, right? It has receptors for light. We call them chromophores. In fact, we know the melanin is the most obvious one, right? But there's urocanic acid, there's hemoglobin, there's water, there's all kinds of different proteins that are actually absorbing light and then fluorescing light, producing chemicals, making hormones. So light on the skin's huge.
Yeah, wow. And then potentially doing that barefoot as well, so you're grounding and you have that component in the morning. Then break your fast with a breakfast, and then biggest meal during the middle of the day. Let's talk about, as we go into the evening, what are ways that we can, in a way, hack our sleep cycle to get better at going to sleep so we can have a deeper, more meaningful sleep? So from late afternoon as the sun's setting, talk me through like a perfect sort of ritual, and then maybe add in some hacks for people that are living in high density, loud, or light filled environments.
Yeah, one of the things I'll mention too about that kind of early morning thing that we didn't touch on is coffee, right? This is such a big, caffeine is the number one drug in the West, right? It's actually, we could, some say that it's responsible for a lot of the advance and amazing things that we've created in the West. So I'm not blaming or hating on caffeine, but we need to understand it, I think, a little bit better, because it's not producing any energy, right? So some people, we drink caffeine and we feel energized. No, it's actually just producing hormones, cortisol and adrenaline and that kind of thing. But one of the things that it does is that it sort of fits into these receptors, these adenosine receptors, right? So this is what blocks sleep. So one of the things that contributes to sleepiness is adenosine fitting into the adenosine receptor, and that kind of lulls us to sleep. Well, instead, we've got caffeine kind of jamming into that receptor. Now adenosine can't get into that receptor, and we don't fall asleep as easily. So that's how caffeine, it blocks sleep, natural sleep, and it produces sort of these wake hormones. So it's essentially stealing energy from tomorrow to get through the day, right? So that's just an important caveat with caffeine. That said, caffeine can be, in small amounts, as long as you don't have infections and some other things going on, it can be good for the brain. So caffeine's not all bad, but if you've got infections, caffeine can be horrible for your system. So it's one of those things that we got to be careful with, but there's a cool hack that we can use with caffeine. If you really love coffee like I do, you can either go and use like a Swiss water decaf, which is a really good solution. Or if you like a little bit of that caffeine, one of the things you can do is you can wait instead of doing it first thing in the morning. Instead, go outside, get that walk in, get that sun in your eyes. That'll boost your cortisol, especially if you do that over on a consistent basis. Then you have your coffee right around 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. So it's still early enough, but you've already passed that cortisol spike. Your cortisol starting to come down a little bit. That's when you want to introduce caffeine. You don't want to like shoot your cortisol way, way up and then have it come crashing down in this artificial kind of way. So that's just one hack with coffee. And the thing relating to your question is not to drink coffee too late in the day. So if you start to drink coffee beyond noon, you could really end up in trouble and causing big sleep issues later on. And everybody metabolizes caffeine differently. So that's one thing that we need to realize. If you haven't run a genetic test to figure out how you process caffeine, you may be drinking caffeine at 10 a.m. even, and it's still in your system really late in the day. So just something to be mindful of because it can impact you. But that's a big no-no is drinking too much caffeine, let's say after noon or so. But as we're getting into that wind down period, again, we're starting to remember the sun's going down, life is slowing down. Just look at nature, right? The birds aren't as active, animals aren't as active, at least not the nocturnal ones. The nocturnal ones start to, but the diurnal ones aren't, right? Life is starting to slow down, right? Everything's starting to quiet. This is the natural flow and the rhythm. So we want to flow with that. We don't want to fight that, right? So if most of us have a job, let's say until 5 or 6 p.m., you may squeeze in a workout right after work. Like that's not the end of that's not the worst thing you can do. But ideally, if we can exercise during the day on a consistent basis, that's preferred. Or if you're only able to do your workout, let's say half an hour, do it during the day, right? See if you can do it at lunch or even in the morning is better than at night because we can ramp up our system, right? What we're doing is we're switching from sympathetic during the day into parasympathetic, ideally toward at the night, right?
So
and
more
that's
gentle breath work, more yin yoga, like a gentle walk, the gentle exercises in the evening, and then in the morning is more of that explosive, let's go type energy. Yeah,
exactly. And even from the mind perspective, right? So we can get into these sort of mind things, like if you're doing intense crossword puzzles at night, or you're watching something, or you're studying something, or you're writing a paper, right? Like even if it's on actual paper with an actual pencil, right? And not looking at a screen, the idea is that you're engaging the mental really hard. That doesn't align with the natural rhythm of your biology. So if we can, as much as we can, we want to start to engage with everything that is slow. Reading a book is nice, right? An actual book, not a Kindle or an iPad or anything. Taking a bath, right? Doing some yin yoga, a little bit of breath work, going for a walk. Going for a walk is always good. Going for a walk before you eat a meal improves digestion. Going for a walk after a meal improves digestion, right? Like going for a walk is just, it's actually one of the only exercises that has been proven to be very associated with longevity. So it is like.
And can I say something on this? Because walking is so ubiquitous in Indigenous culture and it's so lost in the West. Like we drive everywhere. And two stories. So one, I'll be driving on a Sunday back from town in Port Vila in Vanuatu, and it'll be raining. And I've seen a gentleman, he'll have just been to church. He's in his Sunday best. He'll be walking along the side of the road and it's pouring and he's saturated. Now we're scared of getting wet in the West. You know, we run to the car with the women cover their hair and it's dripping down his face. And I stop and I'm like, hey, good morning, sir. Do you want a lift? And he's like, I'm okay. All good. Thank you. And just keeps walking, just the resilience, so powerful. And then I was on an outer island, Epi Island, and they walk to their garden pretty much 3 or 4 days a week, most days. And they said we were going to do some gardening to just sort of as exchange for being there. And I said, how far is the garden? And they said, Emi close up no more, which means it's the close one. It's close, don't worry. Well, 2 and a bit hours walk into the jungle, we get to the close garden, right? So this is insane. The amount of walking and how normalized it is. And a 2-hour walk is like, it's close, that one. There's longer ones that are like 4 hours walk longer and they'll sleep overnight potentially when they stay there. And there's ones that are 2 hours and there's ones that are 3 minutes, So it's such a big part of custom and Indigenous culture and we've just lost it. And just to think, when I'm in Holland, when we eat a meal, we ride our bikes home and it's beautiful. And then you've got
Yeah.
the glucose
Yeah.
goddess who's talking about if you've got a glucose spike during a meal, you go for a walk or a bike ride, it gets rid of that. The sugar gets burnt by the muscles. What if every culture, every household after dinner, let's just go for a walk around the block or to the end of the street and back? I mean, wouldn't that be a game changer? I'm just like,
It is,
yeah,
even if we're eating, bad meals,
yeah,
poor food choices.
yeah,
Like in
or
fact, there's been
especially,
studies because, especially, you're right, exactly, because it partially because it engages that parasympathetic response, and partially because it engages the entire neuromuscular structure, right? So it all the metabolic machinery involved starts to get engaged and improved. So going for a walk is great. Honestly, just relaxing, right? I mean, it's one of the epidemics I see in our culture, and I'm as guilty as this as anybody, is the ability to just shut off and switch off and not clean and not watch TV and not turn on anything and just kind of hang out, right? We're so stuck in this pattern of trying, of always doing something. And that when I don't have anything to actually do, I'll either just zone out and watch some TV, or I'll find something to do, quote unquote, right? And so it's really starting to embrace this other aspect, which is the slowing down, the shutting down, the quiet, the darkness, right? Like this is an archetypal thing I'm trying to point to here, which is that it is the nighttime, it is the darkness, it is this sleep, it is the death, so to speak, right? We want to embrace this aspect of our day, right? So much like life itself, like we can meditate on death, we can think about death, we can acknowledge our own mortality, and that helps us to live better, right? Same thing at night. If we can acknowledge the death of the day, the darkness, right? Whatever happened during the day, this is a good time to metabolize it, to put it to bed, right? To actually let it die, and we can wake up refreshed in the morning. So there's a lot of opportunities here. We can use essential oils, we can use sound therapy of whatever kind, right? Classical music is fantastic for this, but anything that's going to allow the brain to just kind of relax, right? It's like
or
a glass
yoga,
of muddy water, right?
yoga nidra is a
It's
fantastic
fantastic.
practice. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Breath work,
yeah.
right? The 4-7-8 breath, or any kind
Uh-huh.
of box breathing,
Hmm.
anything that's going to allow for a long exhale
Yes.
is a good breath practice. But it's like that glass of muddy water, right? We're constantly stirring it. If we just let it settle, right, then all that stuff starts to go to the bottom, right? So it's really about embracing all these things and finding whatever it is in your house, in your environment, in your lifestyle that you can bring into that environment, and recognizing your patterns of operation that you don't even think about, right? We all get caught in them. And so it's just about bringing a little bit of conscious awareness to some of these. And when we do that, again, not only we're going to improve sleep, right? Again, we don't need to go backwards, but the sleep is really important, right? So it's going to improve sleep in that way, but it's going to allow us to embrace the polarity in every aspect of our life, right? Again, this is an archetypal energy that I'm talking about: slowing down, embracing darkness, embracing quiet, meditating, praying, whatever you can do to kind of engage with that. That will allow you to engage with the light during the day in a much better way, instead of kind of being in no man's land, right? I mean, I'm constantly finding myself in no man's land, and I have to remember, oh yeah, like go into the polarity, go into the darkness, go into the silence. It's really hard to find silence. I can't even find a place to see the stars anymore. You know what I mean? Like we have fundamentally lost the capacity in our modern culture to embrace silence and darkness to its full potential. I got to go into some mountains, I got to drive a long way and go up really high to get out of this light haze that is constantly surrounding me. And this is happening on every level, even the electromagnetic level, this radiation that is persistent, right? So hopefully you can see what I'm pointing to is that the more we can dip into that, it's going to serve us in profound ways, with creativity, with mood changes, with our ability to have insight, right? To know ourselves, to feel into our biology, to understand which foods are better and which ones are not, which exercise is good. All of these perceptions start to improve when we can get into that darkness and into that silence. So it is a deep, deep spiritual practice to start to embrace these things, and it starts to show up in your biology, in your health, in your mood, in your mental processes, in your emotions, everywhere.
Wow. So deep. Let's talk lastly about the bedroom. I
Mm.
remember I was chatting with with Gabby Bernstein on a number of topics, and she was telling me a funny story about how Ariana Huffington famously was the founder of HuffPost and became obsessed with sleep, gave her for as a present a small little bed for her phone. And it was a charging thing, but it was actually like the shape of a bed, and you would put your phone in the sheets
I love
and
that.
like put it to bed, And I feel like the pervasive nature of this always having access to the entire world in our pockets can be a big distraction for a lot of people. So when someone enters their bedroom in the evening, what can we do about temperature, the bed itself, lighting,
Hmm.
phones, Wi-Fi, etc., to really optimize that sleep environment for just peak sleep, peak darkness, peak
Yeah.
peak death in a way, like you say, light and
Yeah.
death, light and darkness, life and death. So how do we embrace that part of the evening the most?
Yeah. I mean, look, in a lot of the indigenous cultures, they talk about that's what we do every night. We actually die, right? We actually die, and we reborn each day, right? And so that's a conceptual way to think about this, right? And I have this fantasy too that when I have enough financial means, I'd like to build my own home, and I actually want to build this sort of separate bedroom chamber that is kind of like mostly underground to block myself from the electromagnetic radiation, the light, get into that cool earthing energy, right? So that's kind of what we want to do, because we want to set up a sanctuary, really, as much as we can. Ideally, let's just stick to modern reality for most of us. Ideally, we would take all electronics out of the room, especially TVs. If you've got TV, it just energetically does not belong in the bedroom. But take as much of the electronics. That means alarm clocks. It means whatever you've got, even lamps maybe that are plugged in. Anything that plugs into the wall, ideally, that would be removed. Okay, phones certainly out of the room. Right, we're really trying to create this environment that is still, right, that is as free of electromagnetic radiation,
Yeah.
right, which is powerful, right? Like, okay, maybe
Or turn
15,
your
20
phone
years ago, we
off
could,
or airplane mode, right?
no,
At minimum, right?
at,
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
least at minimum airplane
Yeah.
mode, minimum, right? Ideally, it's off, because even in airplane, it's still signaling,
Sure.
right? And so, but look, 15, 20 years ago, we could argue the effects of electromagnetic radiation, right? How much is it impacting us? We're not sure. But look, I've seen so many people that are sensitive, and it's to electromagnetic radiation, which means that it's having an effect on all of us. We may not just be perceptive to it, right? So it is here. We are swimming in electromagnetic radiation. And, you even see people creating Faraday cages in the paint that they're using, and all kinds of different structure. There's these netting. In fact, I got one for my son when he was young, because his sleep was so disrupted. I thought, let me try this, and I put a huge Faraday cage around him, because this is an impactful thing. So the more we can just kind of recognize that that's part of our world, I think is important. Some people will go as far as turning off the electrical breaker of their house at
Okay.
night,
Yeah.
right? If you have like the whole
Yeah.
house,
Just
right?
shut it
Some people
down.
have a dedicated breaker, and they can shut off their bedroom, so they can just flip the
Yeah.
switch. Some people do that. Some people have it on a timer,
Mm.
right? So some people have really taken this
Okay.
to the extreme, which is good, right? Because at the end of the day, most of us are sleeping against a
Sure.
wall. Our head is against
Yeah.
the
And there's
wall, a
cable.
bedboard against the wall. There's cable
Yeah.
really about 3 feet up,
Yeah.
right? And that actually has an electrical
Field.
radiation, as
Yeah.
well as electrical
EMF.
field and
Yeah.
magnetic field,
Yeah.
right? And so, but it's also got, the thing is, it's electrical and it's magnetic. So it's got EMF, electrical, and magnetic. So there's a lot going on, and it's dirty. And what I mean by that is that it's a square wave function. Without getting too deep into it, it's not natural. Like the wave function is not natural. So our body is having to contend with the stress signal is really the end of the day. It affects our calcium channels, our voltage gated calcium channels. So this is what affects melatonin production, right? So we see studies have shown this over and over again. Melatonin declines in the case of electromagnetic radiation, right? So look, without getting too paranoid about
Yeah.
it, it's just being smart.
Yeah.
Do what you can,
And turn
right?
off your Wi-Fi
And definitely,
router as well, right? Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
This is a basic one. I think anybody can get, one of the timers that you plug into the wall, right? And you plug your Wi-Fi. If you're using Wi-Fi, ideally you don't have Wi-Fi. You just you hardwire, but that's not the case more and more these days. But you plug your Wi-Fi into the timer, and then it goes off at 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight, whatever the case is for you. But it just goes off, and then it comes back on at 6. That's the easiest solution. Otherwise, you can do it manually. This can have a meaningful impact, to be honest. And you definitely don't want to have that in your room. If you've got a Wi-Fi router, make sure it's away from your bed,
Sure.
especially if you leave it on at night. Um,
And then lighting, you want like dim lighting,
Yep.
more red,
Yep.
more color red, and dark curtains if there's a lot of light outside. And I see a lot of these, there's these really nice big eye
Yep.
pillows that are seeming to be more popular. Is that something that can
Totally.
help?
If you're comfortable with that, right? Find out what you like and what's comfortable for you. Really, what we want to do is try to mimic nature. So, in nature, we would have the sun go down in every climate, whether it's equatorial or Arctic or somewhere in between. The sun would go down and it gets colder, right? So you want to set your thermostat lower, right? So you 64, 65 degrees in the US, as high as maybe 67, but you don't really want it higher than 67 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll let you do the math for Celsius, James. But ultimately, you want to turn down your thermostat at night, and that will actually allow your body to normalize. Your core temperature starts to drop. Your brain temperature will actually fluctuate depending on the sleep cycle. But as your core temperature drops, you actually can induce sleep. So having a room that's even a little bit too hot can prevent the onset of sleep and also the sleep cycles and the depth of sleep. So that room temperature, you want it to be cold. I mean, actually, that's what you want. You want to be slightly chilly so that when you're under the covers, you're feeling really good. That'll induce sleep. With light, the easiest thing to do is just buy these little circular black stickers, or you can use even kind of a duct tape or electrical tape, and just put it over any. If you've got electronics in your room, you've got status lights on something, block that out.
Yeah.
Because even as micro as it is, especially in hotels, this is what I take with me. This is a hack for
Yeah,
hotels.
I know. They're
They're
everywhere.
everywhere. It's wild. I throw a T-shirt over the alarm clock or unplug it. And then,
Yeah, same.
and then I put these stickers.
The TV's always got a light
Exactly.
on it. Like what? There's
Yep.
shirts, there's pants going over
Yep.
things. It's like a Chinese
Totally.
laundry in my hotel room in
Totally.
the morning.
And
Yeah.
so, again, you may not realize that it's impacting your sleep, but as you start to block these things out, you will over time start to sleep better. We are so sensitive to light, so that you want to take care of all the light if you can. And if you do have lights in your room and you didn't unplug everything, in an ideal scenario, get orange light bulbs. Get these deeply orange light bulbs into your lamps. So you might have overhead lighting that you can't change, but get lamps. And at night, just use those orange lamps. And that's what I do for my little one. When we read books at night, I've got the orange light on. Right. And we turn that on and it's deeply orange. And I've had this with clients. I've changed their whole house like red and orange lights. They thought I was crazy at first. And then eventually they thought it was really weird at first. And then eventually they fell in love with it. They started recognizing that in that orange environment, they started getting sleepier. They started feeling more relaxed, more calm. Their mind settled. It literally affected everything to the point where they got to this point where like they had to have it. They couldn't imagine going back to the way that they used to live. So
Love that.
it can really have an impact over time.
So amazing. Incredible insights on sleep, Jason. And I just love this topic so much. I think we could talk about it for forever. And I'm super grateful for your contribution to this masterclass and also to the nutrition certification program. You're such a force for good. And I love this type of topic too, where we can leverage so much power, so much opportunity with something that's quite simple. And if we focus on it a little bit, like people do some of the steps we've spoken about today, they can really make a big difference. Is there any sort of final sort of comment you'd like to make or a tip or something you'd like to share with people before we close out?
Yeah, I'll say that whatever your health regimen is, whatever your steps you're doing to improve your life, whether you've got chronic symptoms that you're trying to fight or you've got just a little things here and there, chronic pain, don't underestimate this piece. Continue to do all the other things, right? Fixing your diet and optimizing your exercise and your supplements and maybe even your pharmaceuticals, whatever you're doing in your life to sort of manage or treat or improve. Really don't underestimate this. Don't pretend or assume that this is not a piece of the puzzle. When you start to implement this, everything can actually take hold so much better. And again, what I've noticed in my clients, skin improves, eyesight has improved, weight loss occurs, mood improves, hormones improve, thyroid function. I mean, we've got food sensitivities, some of these things that are kind of these peripheral symptoms that it's not like they're main focused. They're like, oh, my nails are growing faster and my hair is regrowing. And it's like these things just start showing up. And it's because the body's starting to get optimized. So, it's worth trying. Give it 21 days. Get up in the morning, go outside for a walk, do some of the things at night. And I promise you that you will notice it somewhere, somehow. It's going to show up. It's going to impact you somewhere. It might be your digestion improves. It might be your stool formation is better. Like, it can improve anything and everything in your body. So multiple systems can be impacted, and it's definitely one of those things that I think everybody should try.
I love it. And it's a joy. It's a joy to get a good night's sleep. And
Really
let's
is.
stop saying sleep like a baby. Let's say let's sleep like a well-adjusted, well-informed, balanced circadian rhythm adult. That's the new call. I love it, Jason. Great to connect with you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Likewise.
Wow, I just love this conversation with Jason. There's so many takeaways. And since doing this interview, I've been able to improve my sleep quality fivefold, maybe tenfold even, just by applying some of the things that we learned. Please make sure to comment below what are your biggest takeaways from this interview. Can't wait to hear the unique takeaways that some of you had. And if you want to go deeper, I know you're going to love our nutrition certification program. We dive deeper into sleep and stress and helping you manage this naturally. To find out more about the current intake that we have open for a limited time, please click the banner below this video. Till then, I'll see you for the masterclass tomorrow. Ciao, ciao.